Hey guys, Level Cap here, and today is Monday, which means it's time for another episode of Loadout, the series where you guys, the viewers, get to help me pick and choose a custom kit loadout to talk about and potentially review for each Monday's episode. The way you do this is you leave a comment in the video description telling me what kind of gun and accessories you would like me to run with, and I will pick one of the top rated comments for my next week's episode of Loadout. This episode's comment comes from Jack Assassin. Yes, very clever name, sir. It is the PP2000 Kobra Laser Extended Mags Ammo Pack C4 M9 Suppressed. Have fun, he says. I was looking forward to trying this out. It is pretty similar to the MP7 setup that I ran with last week, but you know what? I've never really used the PP2000 since beta. You know, I tried it in beta and was like, and I might have gotten a kill or two with it prior to this video, but for the most part I really just didn't have any attachments, and I was like, you know what, it's time I gave the PP2000 a try and see what all the fuss is about. Now, being a PDW, the PP2000 can be used for any class, and I agree with using support right here for this weapon just because the gun has essentially 3 reloads. If you shoot through your entire magazine, you can do that 3 times before you're going to need to get some more ammo, unless you are running with extra ammo. But if you run with support, then you can pick a perk like Sprint, although I'm kind of doubled up with it currently. But running with Sprint and say a support class is great, because then you don't have to worry about ammo so much, and you can be a little bit more nimble. And being nimble with this gun is very important because it does really well in close quarters, and for close quarters action you want to be able to run fast. So we've got the Kobra sight on here, and that gives us a nice open sight. It's not very cluttered, keeps the visuals nice and clean, and that's very important for close quarter combat. But with the addition of the laser and the extended mags, this thing can be hip fired very easily for lots of good close quarter action where you don't actually need to aim down the sight, giving you a slightly bigger lead on your enemy if they have to aim down the sight before firing at you. And it maintains great accuracy, much like the MP7 does. However, there's a pretty big difference between this weapon and the MP7, and that is the MP7 has a 950 round per minute rate of fire, while the PP2000 only has a 650 round per minute rate of fire, which is considerably slower. However, the PP2000 makes up for this slower rate of fire by having an increased bullet damage. The MP7 does 20 damage maximum and 11.2 damage minimum, yet its fall off is at 46 meters, while the PP2000 does a 25 damage maximum. That's 5 damage more per bullet and a 12.5 damage minimum, and the drop off is increased to 50 meters. So the gun's going to be doing considerably more damage per shot, but at the lower rate of fire, it's not going to be, it's going to actually be doing a little bit less damage per second than the MP7. So I would still say the MP7's a bit more lethal in close quarters, but at long range, the PP2000 can actually even the scales. So it's still a very good and lethal weapon in close quarters, but at long range, it does a little bit better job than the MP7. So it's a nice variety, and it can actually handle maps like this one here where we're playing Team Deathmatch Firestorm, which has a lot of longer range engagements, and I'm able to actually still kill guys at a distance with the PP2000 better than I could with the MP7. Now, because I was using this gun for pretty much the first time since beta, and I didn't have any of the attachments unlocked, I did have to kind of work my way up for a few rounds, getting everything unlocked for it. But I have to say, this gun base with 20 bullets in a magazine is incredibly underpowered. I was able to, you know, get a few kills with it, but the difference between extended mags and base is just so huge, and I wish DICE would give this gun maybe 30 rounds base and then let extended mags bump it to 40 instead of having it start with 20 rounds. I think that's just, well, it's 21 rounds technically, and I just think that's a too few rounds to actually be able to do anything serious with this weapon from the start. And I think that would be a nicer balance and let newer players or players using the gun for the first time actually enjoy it, rather than just kind of grinding through the unlocks till you get it extended mag. So another thing about this weapon that makes it a little bit better than the MP7 at longer range is the lower side-to-side recoil with a left pull of 0.3 and a right pull of 0.2, while the MP7 has a left and right pull of 0.45, which is considerably higher. Low side-to-side recoil makes the gun much better for longer range shooting, while upwards recoil allows you to, it's basically easier to control upwards recoil than it is side-to-side recoil, so you can keep your shots very accurate at long distances. Now, coupling the extremely low side-to-side recoil with the pretty low rate of fire, 650 rounds per minute is fairly low for an automatic weapon. It becomes very easy to control the recoil. In fact, the recoil is basically non-existent with this weapon, so that's a very nice perk. And you can really just hip fire this thing all day long and not worry about controlling recoil or your accuracy reducing too much. Hip firing can easily be overlooked as sort of a perk that's maybe not worth it or not worthwhile. If you guys haven't tried out some of these hip firing weapons using a laser sight to better increase your hip fire accuracy, like the MP7 or the PP2000, or even some of the better hip fire assault rifles like the F2000, I would suggest giving it a try, because hip firing gives you a pretty big advantage in a lot of close quarter battles. To bring iron sights up to your face before you can fire the weapon takes about 2.64 seconds, and if you're using a holographic sight or something that zooms in a little bit more, it can take about a third of a second. So not having to waste that quarter second or third second to bring sights up to your eyes before engaging your enemy can actually win you a lot of firefights, especially with the increased suppression mechanic now. Getting off those first few rounds before your opponent does can affect their aim enough to the point where it'll either only get you hit once in a firefight or basically allow you to avoid all of your opponent's shots. So having that split-second reaction time of just aiming and firing without bringing up those reflex sights can win you a lot more gun battles than you would think. Now, another benefit from the PP2000 that I sort of started to appreciate later as I was getting more comfortable with the weapon and thinking about the differences between using this hip firing and the MP7 hip firing was that the slow rate of fire, I ended up wasting a lot less bullets after my opponents die. So with the MP7, you'll be shooting 950 rounds per minute. Your opponent dies and you're probably still firing, you want to make sure that they're dead, and you'll end up wasting a good 5 to 10 rounds after each enemy. And this can force you, since it's both guns have a 40 round magazine, this can force you to reload much more with the MP7, which kind of pulls you out of the action or can often get you killed, especially if you're in a lot of close quarters fights and there's 2 or 3 bad guys that you got to worry about, and you drop 1 or 2 and then have to reload and the third kills you. Well, with the PP2000, because of its slower rate of fire, when your enemy dies and you let off the trigger, you've usually only wasted between like 2 and 4 rounds, and this can allow you to have many more rounds left over in your magazine to engage multiple targets before you need to reload next. And I was finding this out a lot in close quarters, and it's quite nice to have, actually. I mean, you could try and practice more with an MP7 and get much more accurate at letting off the trigger when you think your opponent's dead, but there's nothing worse than stopping your firing before your opponent dies, thinking that you fired off enough rounds to kill them, as that does happen to me every now and then, and it's pretty aggravating. So not having to try and guess that you're gonna exactly when you're gonna kill your opponent and letting off that trigger at the perfect time, not having to do that with the PP2000 quite as much is a really good benefit, and just conserving your ammo in general. I think it's pretty apparent that the PP2000 in the long run is just not as popular a weapon as, say, the MP7. I definitely see the MP7 on the battlefield much more than the PP2000 or even the P90, and I think a lot of the reasoning for that is just the sheer killing power of the MP7 is a bit more in close quarters than the PP2000, and in many cases, and a lot of competitive players just want the fastest firing or the fastest damage dealing weapon out there, because when it comes down to it, the ultimate damage that you're able to put out with a weapon becomes extremely valuable, and that's very useful for competitive gameplay or more competitive playing environments, but in team deathmatch where you do need to conserve ammo or pubbing, I think the PP2000 does have a good place in this game. So the trade-offs are there definitely between the MP7 or the PP2000 or even the P90 and some of the other things like the UMP5. I would say takes the accuracy a little bit further and the damage output a little bit less. So it's kind of like just going a little bit further down the direction of the PP2000 and slowing down the rate of fire and increasing the long range accuracy in exchange for slightly less overall damage output. So just depending on what your playstyle is or what the map is, you can switch up between those PDWs, but the PP2000 I think has a nice balance between all of them. So if you're in a map that has a lot of medium range, the PP2000 can fare pretty well, and it handles wonderfully in close quarters as well, even if the MP7's a little bit better. That's it for this episode of Loadout. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please rate it, and don't forget to leave your comments down below about what kind of kit customization you would like me to run with for next week's episode. I'll see you guys next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.